What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another review. This time we're taking a look at Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery. This is a standalone sequel to the first Knives Out movie that came out in 2019. As with that movie, this is written and directed by Rian Johnson, a man you either like or you hate. I'm in the middle. I don't hate Rian Johnson. I like some of his stuff, but I also think his other works can be hit and miss. So, with all that being said, let's just go over the premise real quick. The overall story of Knives Out 2 is as follows. Miles Braun, played by Edward Norton, is like this billionaire tech genius who invites friends to his private island in Greece to play a murder mystery game. However, things go awry when a murder does take place. So now, Benoit Blanc, who is also on this island through very contrived means, has to solve the puzzle to this mystery. So yeah, that is the overall premise of Knives Out 2. Let's just go over this thing as fast as we can. Overall, I think Knives Out 2 is... This movie is not on the same length as its predecessor. The first Knives Out movie, to me, on a second watch, yes, a lot of it is very contrived. A lot of it is very... a lot of coincidences need to take place. A lot of, yeah, just go with it has to be said. But as an overall experience, the first Knives Out movie is really solid, very strong, backed by a really good cast and just a very good murder mystery premise that was simple and fairly easy to follow, despite a lot of the plot contrivances and situations that needed to be dumbed down in order to make the story work. Overall, Knives Out 1 was a very good movie. Now you get to Knives Out 2, and it pretty much takes everything the first movie did, and to me, Knives Out 2 felt more like self-parody. If this movie felt like a self-parody, like this movie was trying to be clever at poking fun of itself, but it came across as trying way too hard. That's my biggest gripe with Knives Out 2, is that it was trying way too hard to be a self-parody and make fun of itself, when all the while this movie should have been more in the spirit of that first movie, in which, yes, it's riffing on a genre, but it's also taking itself relatively serious. This movie, like I said, it felt like self-parody. I mean, there's even a scene at the end where Benoit Blanc is flat out calling the villain of the villain an overall idiot who got lucky. That's not a good thing to have in your murder mystery. And Rian Johnson did that with this. Now, I don't consider that clever writing. I consider that borderline cheap. The overall villain plot and the mystery itself is the worst aspect of this movie, because a lot of conveniences and contrivances and a lot of turning off your brain needs to be done in order to even buy that this plan could even work on a subhuman level. In which it will not, because too many things need to be set in perfect place in order for this thing to go out without a hitch. Like, it's you can only suspend your disbelief for so long until you start to be like, okay, in a real life situation, there's no way in hell this can even happen as good as it does. And there are certain situations where the characters have to be either completely stupid, dumbed down, and don't even think to ask any legitimate questions. In order, I mean, every character needs to ask a certain question in order, and because this movie does a twist, and you're like, okay, this person has clearly known this group of people for a very long time, and not one of these people knew about this. They're just finding out about this now. I mean, if it flat out states that they've known each other for over a decade, so within that 10-year span, not one person even thought to say, hey, listen, do you really have any other? Like, not one person said that within 10 years. That never became an answer. And if it was, why would she just avoid it? Yeah. I'm not going to dance around. The twist is that one of the characters has a twin sister. And the twin sister plays a vital role in this movie because her sister is her sister's death is the catalyst of this whole plot, of this movie's plot. And what makes it questionable is that not one person ever questioned this woman about her having any immediate family or any, like, siblings. Like, that's what I mean about how a lot of just really awkward contrivances need to be done in order for this overblown, confusing plot to even have some semblance of working. And like I said, that's this movie's biggest fault, is that the overall plot is a mess. The villain plot is a mess. The murder mystery is the worst aspect of this movie. Man, yeah, you do get some cool scenes here and there. I mean, you do get some cool scenes peppered throughout, which I'm not going to lie, they're very well done, very entertaining. But again, a lot of contrivances need to be done. Like the weak point is really the writing in terms of the overall plot. The strong suit is the cast. The acting in this movie is fine, with the exception of Janelle Monáe, who I thought was the weakest aspect of this entire movie. Her performance is not wretched, but yeah, there are a lot of scenes where she should be emoting some anger, and it comes across as her just being overall mildly annoyed and barely putting any emotion into it. Her fake Southern accent she puts on to play the twin sister of Helen is horribly bad. The only time she shows any real emotions when she's playing the character of Andy, but even that character, when she goes on a temper tantrum, barely has any energy to it. It's like she's sleepwalking. Like, Janelle Monáe is the most uninteresting part out of this entire movie. And that's a shame, because she's basically the crux. She's the heart of the movie. The entire movie is written around her, around the characters of Andy and Helen, with everyone else pretty much being supporting. Daniel Craig returns as Benoit Blanc, and I liked him in that first movie, and I like him in this. Daniel Craig's very entertaining. He's a very funny guy when he has a chance to do comedic stuff. I ain't gonna lie, I got a lot of laughs out of him. I mean, the Foghorn Leghorn accent is really weird and jarring, but to Daniel Craig's credit, he does the best he can with it, and it works. It genuinely works. The supporting cast around him, you got Leslie Odom Jr., I thought he was fine in the role. Catherine Hahn plays a corrupt politician. She was okay. Kate Hudson plays this fashion model who is too dumb to function and doesn't even know what a sweatshop is. No, she was fine in the role. Jessica Henwick plays her assistant. She's all right. Doesn't really do anything, to be honest with you. Dave Bautista, plays a character called Duke Cody, who is a men's right YouTuber / Twitch streamer. I thought he was actually pretty funny. And you could have done so much more with the Duke Cody character, with that entire aspect of his character. And honestly, truthfully, I think that Bautista was kind of underutilized in this movie. And I just think Bautista gets a lot of bad rap for being an actor, because unlike most wrestlers turned actors, Bautista tries to take roles outside of the action genre, and he tries to break the mold of, just because he's a wrestler, that doesn't mean he's only good for action. You know, he'll do an action movie like Guardians of the Galaxy, but then he's doing something like Blade Runner 2049, which is not really an action movie. That's a thinking man's science fiction movie. Even though I've never seen Dune, Dune is a thinking man's science fiction movie that's really light on the action and more on the philosophical themes. You know, to Bautista's credit, he'll go outside the norm. And in this movie, he's playing a comedic character, and I thought he was pretty good in it. I got a lot of laughs out of him. I would have liked to have seen Duke Cody actually last a little longer than he actually did, to be honest with you. And by all accounts, I enjoyed Edward Norton as the character of Miles Braun. Miles Braun is basically what Edward Norton is in real life, which is just arrogant, pompous asshole. And listen, Edward Norton behind the camera, you either like him or you hate him. The man, Edward Norton, to me, is very misunderstood. He's about wanting to make a good product. That's Edward Norton. And to an extent, that's the Miles Braun character. He wants to do something that's outrageous, even if it means putting lives at risk, in which the character of Miles Braun does. And the whole mystery of this thing is that Miles Braun is revealed to have been the guy who killed the Andy character, because Miles has this hydraulic crystal that can produce unlimited energy resource, but there's a catch to it. If it's exposed, it could be it could be extremely harmful, which we see at the end of the movie when the whole compound gets exploded. But he doesn't care. He wants to get this out into the world, and in order to do that, he has to get the approval of Andy. Andy disapproved. She ends up leaving the company. Miles, in a last-ditch effort to try and persuade her, ends up poisoning her, killing her, and then takes credit for the whole thing is really stupidly dumb, contrived, and just hard to keep track of. Like, Miles Braun's villain plot, it really was made by a stupid person, because in order for this thing to even work, everything needs to fall into place. And it gets to the point of being very unbelievable. And like I said earlier, when the movie points out the fact that the villain is a dummy and everything that he did was based on sheer dumb luck and just you know, having his friends stick by his side by blackmailing them. Listen, the blackmailing aspect, that's okay. But everything else around it, that's where the movie's flaws really start to take form. And you're like scratching your head like, okay, can this thing end already? Like, you know, Glass Onion could have been a good murder mystery if Rian Johnson was actually, you know, if Rian Johnson actually had someone polish his screenplay. To be honest, he needed a polish. Rian Johnson's good at coming up with concepts. He's like, it's like the Rob Zombie syndrome. Just because you're good at coming up with concepts and story premises, that doesn't necessarily mean you got the talent enough to write it. And that's not to discredit Rian Johnson, because I thought Looper was a really well-written science fiction movie. And just like I thought the first Knives Out movie was overall very well written, this one is more hit and miss written. Like, it has certain things in it that need to be tweaked and fixed. And side note, I am not a fan of the incorporation of COVID into this movie, which is what Rian Johnson did. He used the pandemic in this movie. And listen, I go to watch movies to escape the real world. I don't want to watch movies to see the real world. I do not want to watch a movie where I see people wearing masks and afraid to touch one another. That's not why I go to watch movies. I go to watch movies to get away from that bullshit. So the fact that Rian Johnson incorporated that, listen, other people would say, oh, it's more realistic because it shows it takes place in the real world. Well, listen, movies are not meant to be the real world. Movies are meant to be a romanticized version of the real world. So yeah, I didn't like that aspect, to be honest with you. And yeah, it's a little thing. I didn't like it. However, I did like the cameo by Ethan Hawke. That was nice. I mean, I wish Ethan Hawke was more of a character in the movie, to be honest with you. I mean, hell, it would have been cool if Ethan Hawke and Miles Kennedy were in coots together. That would have made the movie feel to maybe have a little more sense to it. But hey, it is what it is. But listen, overall, you know, Glass Onion is one of those movies that you're either going to like it or you're going to hate it. I think the first part of this movie runs really slow. The middle section of this movie is an elongated flashback in where you really see the contrivances really take form. And then the last part of this movie is all right. And it leads to an overall just middle-of-the-road package for me, which is why I'm going to give Glass Onion a solid, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. It's entertaining. It is entertaining. It does have good acting. The character bantering is nice. The murder mystery on paper is good, but in execution, way too contrived, way too over the top, and too many scenarios need to perfectly fall into place in order for it to even work without a hitch. That's just my thoughts. So yeah, let me know yours in the comment sections down below. Like the video and subscribe, and I'll check you back next time for more.